case, let us bring our hearts and minds to worship. And now, David Schwartz.
Good morning. This is not the worship service that we all expected to be at right now. And here we are. It's really good to be joining all together this morning. Welcome to Beverly Unitarian Church. My name is Reverend David Schwartz. I am the minister here. And whether we gather in person or whether we gather online like we are right now, we welcome all people here. Every color of the rainbow from every place on earth. Literally, right now, people could be joining from any place on earth. Whatever your past or your present is like, we invite you to walk into the future with us. In this congregation, we celebrate a diversity of beliefs. We're striving always to make space for more. And like other Unitarian Universalist congregations, we affirm certain principles. Normally, those would be on the back of your order of service, but instead, I think today I will invite you to check out the Wikipedia article for the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism. I'm delighted today to welcome our other speakers, and they'll introduce themselves to you as we go through. And I'm delighted too to welcome visitors. I hope you'll stay for coffee hour after the service. Coffee hour is going to be happening virtually right here in Zoom. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can like and follow the Facebook page where hopefully on future weeks it will be possible to see worship. Our offering this morning is going to take place online. It's for the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. So I invite you as we get a little bit later in the service to follow the link for that. Before we move into our first speaker, before I turn it over to Jennie to start us off, I want to say I was struck. I happened to come across the story about Margaret Mead, the anthropologist. Margaret Mead was asked by one of her students what she thought the first sign of civilization was, right? So what separates civilization from, just wandering chaos? And the student thought, it would be fish hooks or clay pots or grinding stones. But what she said was the first sign of civilization in an ancient culture was a femur, leg bone that had been broken and then healed. And she said, look, in the animal kingdom, if you break your leg, you die. You can't run from danger. You can't go get a drink. You can't get food. And no animal survives a broken leg bone long enough for it to heal. So the fact that this femur had healed was evidence someone else had taken time to stay with the one who had fell, had bound up the wound, had carried the person to safety, had tended them. Helping someone else through difficulty is where civilization starts, Margaret Mead said. And that's the moment that we're in right now, the moment of helping each other through difficulty. This strange moment where each of us is in our own space, totally disconnected from each other, and each of us are coming together in this online space, getting strength and support and help from one another. In that spirit, I'm glad to be in worship with you this morning, and glad to turn it over to Jennie. And as she comes back onto video to lead the call to worship and the chalice lighting.
Can everybody see me?
Yeah.
David, can everybody see me now? Okay. This week, I said to a certain teenager I know, this is going to be the event that everyone asks your generation about. My generation gets, where were you on 9/11? My parents' generation gets, where were you when JFK was shot? My grandparents' generation got, where were you when Pearl Harbor was bombed? You'll get, where were you during the COVID-19 pandemic? This teen replied with spot-on comic timing, no, I won't, because everybody will have the same answer, at home. True, I thought, but my point still holds. The COVID-19 pandemic is an event that literally teaches each touches each and every one of us. But it touches each and every one of us differently. So we will all have our own personal story to tell. And these stories will matter because they are not small stories. They are big stories that touch upon the big themes of existence. Life and death, danger and safety, wellness and illness, both physical and mental, isolation and community, fear and comfort, individual sacrifice for the good of the whole, how the actions of all, one, affect the lives of all. These big themes are the stuff of ethics and spirituality, in short, of faith. That is why I proposed to the worship committee that this week's service be a patchwork service in which we start telling those personal stories. Anna Carvlin, Stacy Recht, and I will each speak for 5 to 7 minutes to tell a story of how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected us in some way, personally, professionally, or as a member of society, and how we reflect on that story in the context of our Unitarian Universalist faith. I emphasize that this is the start, not the end, of our storytelling, and the start, not the end, of reflection on how our stories of this time in our collective lives inform or are informed by our UU faith. Lao Tzu said, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." Let today be that single step. I hand it off to Anna Carvlin.
Morning, everyone. I'm going to light the chalice. So we light this candle, the flame of our heritage. May it ignite hope in our lives, in our community, and in the world. And I will pass it off to Josh.
And we have hymn number 403, Spirit of Truth, of Life, of Power. And if you have the order of service or know the words, you can sing along with us. Spirit of truth, of life, of power, we bring ourselves as gifts to thee. Oh, bind our hearts this sacred hour in faith and hope and charity. And I'll pass it back to Anna.
Okay. So the covenant, love is the spirit of this church and service is its law. This is our great covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. So last week when we were on Facebook, we had people greeting in the comments. You can also, if you're on the video, you can also comment here, but feel free to greet from hand to hand or from computer to computer and say hello. I'll give you guys a minute to chat into the chat box.
If you've never used Zoom before, at the bottom of the screen, you should be able to see a little bubble that says chat. If you click that, you'll be able to chat with others.
Another note on chatting, your chat box will say to everyone, or there's a pull down menu where you can speak to individuals personally. So in general, it's best to chat to everyone unless you have something that's private for just one member of the congregation.
Okay, so feel free to continue that throughout. I don't think it's too much of an interruption if you want to add something here. So I'm going to get started on my reflection after I get a sip of coffee. So it's fun for me. A lot of you guys may have not met my partner in life, Susanna Bobby. She's joining me this morning. So she doesn't typically attend services with me, so this is a treat. We've been spending a whole lot of time together lately at home. So I think one of the things, and thank you, Jennie, for inviting me to do this. One of the things I've been reflecting on this past week is, a week and a half really, is that is loss, and the idea that it's okay to mourn losses big and small. So I think I've been seeing a lot of people say, oh, I know it's just this or that, and it's this little thing that I had to cancel, or this other thing isn't that big of a deal. I think it's okay for all of us to say, you know what, it really sucks that I had to let go of that thing. And it's okay that it's not the worst thing in the world that happened to you. It's okay to mourn your losses, big and small. So one of the losses that I experienced this week was that we had to cancel our wedding. Me and Suzanne were set to be married yesterday at 5 p.m. That was the same exact time that the governor put the order in place, the stay-at-home, shelter-at-home order. And so I think, you know, I reserve the right to mourn that fact. And you know, while it took us some time to kind of let it sink in and for us to sort of reestablish our new reality, we're still sad. And so what happened was, not this past Friday, but the Friday before afternoon, we were told by the venue that they weren't going to host any of their events. And at that point, we were sad, but the writing was on the wall, because we had been informed by several people that they weren't going to make it, and we completely understood. So in all likelihood, we would have canceled the next day anyways. So we found out later, so because, you know, it would have just been awkward and very sparsely attended event. And so we found out later 11 of our guests were somehow directly or indirectly in contact with someone who was infected with the virus. And so we're just really grateful. It's a really easy thing to be grateful pretty immediately, that none of our guests were seriously affected. So yeah, over the course of the last week, the CDC guidelines and our governor's guidelines and the leadership, you know, kind of decreased the number of people you should be hanging out with. It went from like 250, then 100, then 50, then 10. So we certainly would have been outside of that realm. So I said to Suzanne that we didn't get cold feet, but we got COVID feet. So, and you know, we chose this date for multiple reasons, because it fell right, well, first of all, one of the reasons was it fell right near the first day of spring. So we planned a Nowruz theme. Nowruz is the celebration of the equinox in many countries around the Middle East. It's sometimes referred to as the Iranian New Year or the Persian New Year. And Suzanne's half Iranian, so that was a nice way to honor her. It's a nice secular celebration of new beginnings and bright starts. And so to me, spring is kind of one of these bittersweet, it's bittersweet in that life is really kind of busting forth, but it's a struggle and it's a fight to get through, and but it's a promise of good things right around the corner. So likewise, we ended up actually getting married on Friday, and I'll show you a few photos of that. So and part of the reason too is that I'm pregnant now, and so it was really important for us to first, tricky for same-sex to do any adopting at the time of birth, and that would have been extremely. So I'll actually show you photos. I know some of you all are on the just the phone, but I'll just say a couple of words about these, and hopefully we can share this video later. So we kind of had fun with this. We had to have fun with it. It was really just a couple of us. So David went along with it, which is great. I called him that morning and asked him if he could sign our paper, and he said agreed. So that was very nice of him. We went to the other Unitarian church in Hyde Park, and let's see. So there's me and Suzanne with our toilet paper vase with our bouquet. There's a nice close-up of our toilet paper vase. And here we are cheering our Purells. Oh, and David had a Purell too. And then we're getting a little hand sanitizer there. Celebrating, I had to be the one to catch the bouquet. And then there's us just quarantined. And then just quarantined. So let me close that out. So just to close, see, do you still see me, Sus? Okay. So one thing that to me lessens the blow of our loss is that the entire world really is in this together, and spreading out our sadness and sharing our good cheer when we have it is really important. And also in this moment, reframing is relatively simple. At least no one in my circle died, at least now. But it is also a moment of reflecting on that reality and reflecting on the possibility and the potential of that reality, and thinking about our loved ones, like my 93-year-old grandparents who are still going to the store. And, you know, so it's a moment to reflect on how real true loss would be impacting us. And so it's also shedding our identity as Americans. We think, oh, Americans, we're so invincible. Well, maybe not. Maybe we're very, very, very vulnerable. In fact, maybe more so than some other countries. So it's a process of letting go of what we thought was important. And in that process of letting go of expectations, maybe we can find more happiness. And so, you know, at this time, be patient with unbidden messages from your family members and needs and wants and desires. You know, I know I mentioned to somebody to be careful about smoking, and of course that was definitely not welcome, but it enhances the gravity of the disease. So, you know, maybe you're telling people not to go to the store, or maybe you're hearing these unbidden messages from them. I just think it's a moment to be very patient. And so, you know, right now it's a moment of less bad. Our governor said the other day that all of our decisions are about picking the least bad route. Many of us not too thrilled with our presidential candidates will make the least bad choice. doctors right now constantly weighing the most good, least bad option for their parents or patients, and they're always doing that. Sometimes that means pulling life support. Doctors in Italy are faced with deciding who should continue treatment based on the likelihood of their survival and age because treatment's limited. So amidst all of this upheaval, we're faced with a reckoning. It demands that we ask what is purely good, and I think it's sometimes we don't know. And aim for good, that what's around the corner might be something good indeed. Thank you. So let me back to you all. Who's next?
I am next, and I
Yes,
know I'm
okay.
audible,
Great.
but I need the host to start my video again.
Okay.
Okay, I'm visible again. Every week, we experience many joys and many concerns. This week, we carry even more concerns than usual, but also many of the simple joys of life have become clearer to us. Because we are online, I'd like to give some instructions for how Candles of Community are going to work today. I will, in a moment or two, invite folks who are online to share their Candles of Community in the chat. I'll remind you that this video will be recorded and made public, so you may wish to be more private with some of the details that you share today. If there is a joy or sorrow that is too personal, we are going to do the equivalent of raising two fingers, just like we do in church. Please type the letter I twice into your chat box, and I will know that is two fingers. I will attempt to read everyone's name out loud and light a candle for them, not the content of your chat. If I miss seeing anyone's name, I sincerely apologize. Also, for those who are listening on the phone and don't have a chance to hear or speak your own joys and sorrows, I will have a list of joys and sorrows that probably encompass many, many of us. And please know that we are all thinking specifically of you when we are saying them, as well as all of those who cannot be here for this service for one reason or another. So I will start by saying that Francoise shared already in the chat that John LaPlante has passed away. Forgive me if that's a mispronunciation of the virus. So we light a candle for him. At this time, I invite others to share their joys and concerns in the chat. Katrina, for you. Stacy. Doug. From someone posting by iPhone whose name is not visible. Carolyn. Maria. Amanda. Merrick, Linda, Greg, Victoria, Chris, Amanda for Mary, for those who are sick and care for them, for those who grieve, for those whose age or physical health makes them vulnerable, for those whose economic security is threatened, for those who are anxious, for those who are isolated, for those who reach out to assist or comfort others in any way they can, for those who risk their lives by going to work each day, and for those who stay home to protect them, for those in leadership, that they may make wise decisions for the well-being of all, for the simple gifts that life still gives us, even in the most trying times, for the victims of violence, and for all the joys and sorrows left unshared, but that are nevertheless on our hearts. I'm going to try and move my screen so you can see all these beautiful candles. Let us now be in silence together for 7 breaths.
Dona nobis pacem pacem. Dona nobis 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 pacem. Now we have our message from Jennie.
Can you still see me? I've switched over to read my script off of Word. I am the director of a small to medium-sized suburban public library. Librarianship is an idealistic and ethically driven profession. I almost said perfection. That might have been a Freudian slip. The 12 core values of librarianship are to the American Library Association what the 7 principles are to the Unitarian Universalist Association. And to not get tongue-tied from here on out, I'll be calling them the ALA and the UUA. Because I belong to both, I am no stranger to sets of ethical principles. But what I really did not fully understand until last week is that systems of ethical principles, however consistent they may appear at face value, in times of crisis can reveal surprising internal contradictions. I will explain this as I tell the story of how I decided to close the library I administer in response to the COVID-19 crisis. As a suburban library director, I report to a 7-member publicly elected board. In practice, however, this has been done in consultation with the board. We had concluded that if the schools closed, the library would too. On Friday, March 13th, hours before the governor ordered the closure of all schools, our local school districts made their own call to close. At that moment, my board president and I hit our first ethical stumbling block, the ALA core value of democracy. While the letter of the law, or in this case policy, granted me sole authority to close the library, the spirit of the policy was based on an assumed closure of a few hours to a few days, not of 2 weeks or more. The spirit of the policy suggested that the elected board should be consulted, so my board president instructed me to consult them. By 4:00 p.m. from my 7-member board, I had heard 7 different opinions, ranging from we should close now to we should probably close, but not just yet, to I'm reluctant to close, to this is all probably just an overreaction, stay open. 4 of the 7 favored remaining open until the regularly scheduled board meeting the following Tuesday to take a vote. All who favored staying open core value, access. The library, and if we those with internet connected devices at home could still download library ebooks and e-media, while those without would lose all access to our physical books and other materials. Libraries provide daytime shelter for people experiencing homelessness, a safe place for latchkey children while their parents are at work, and a refuge for at-risk teens who would be otherwise doing who knows what on the streets. Closing would take away access to all of that. However, another ALA core value is social responsibility, which they define as the contribution that librarianship can make to ameliorating the critical problems in society. In the view of my board president and myself, the most pressing social problem at that moment was slowing the spread of the virus. At 5 p.m. Friday, I went home with regret and shame that neither my board president nor I, especially I, had shown the courage to prioritize social responsibility over access and democracy at that critical juncture. But life gives us second chances. At 9 a.m. Saturday, March 14th, a staff member contacted me with a concern. 3 days prior, they had attended a social event with an individual who had since discovered that their coworker had tested positive. Granted, our staff member was still 1 degree of separation from contact with a known case. And I regret that I felt I needed an excuse to act, but now I had a justification to make the decision that I had not had the courage to make the previous day. I called my board president and informed her that I would close the library effective at noon that day. I was lucky in that I did not get pushback from my board when I closed the library. Other library directors in much more politically fraught situations were not so fortunate. Thus far, I have been discussing ethics. If one literally consults a list of them, when or religious denominations, because one already innately believes for backup. Or perhaps the actions become automatic when needed. Organizations formulate and rehearse codes of ethics so that they can be applied automatically in a crisis. Or perhaps chicken and egg style, it is an iterative process where one leads to the other. We choose the organizations we affiliate with because we find we belong among people who hold values that support ours. And we rely on those organizations to guide us in our continuing formation as individuals who can act on those ethical principles in the times when they need them. Come to think of that, that sounds like another ethical principle I've heard somewhere: acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. Oh yeah, that's another one from the UUA. Something tells me I'm in the right place. And now, Stacy Recht.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Can you see me? So I am pretending to be in front of the castle. And this is the moment when we talk about philanthropy. We, as you know, every fourth Sunday, the offering goes in its entirety to an organization outside of the church. This Sunday, our offertory will be going to the United Universalist Service Committee, which you can donate to at uusc.org. And I at once here and post that link in the chat window. Also look for it in the Facebook page, please. The UUSC is a nonprofit, non-sectarian organization advancing human rights with an international community of grassroots partners and advocates. Right now is a time of emergency, which means people will step in and be their best selves, and some will maybe be their worst selves. And so protecting human rights is a really important thing to consider in a time of pandemic, or any time of emergency, or any time of non-emergency, any time at all. So I will give you a moment to consider making a donation to UUSC, and I will ask that someone who has access to the BUC Facebook page post that link as well there. And thank you. And now I am going to switch to the reflection. This is the first time I think I've been asked to give a reflection for BUC, and I'm so honored. And I think that the reason Jennie chose me was because I was feeling very anxious last week about my employer's decisions to cancel, or BUC's and other organizations I'm involved in. So it's called Get Better Soon. After a long hiatus, and those of you who are friends with me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter are aware of this, it was a long hiatus. I returned to social media this week because I was feeling really hungry for some chatter aside from the repeated dog of my daughter when she sees a dog walk by. I was feeling a little lonely. So a friend of mine tweeted, I asked the universe to help me reduce my carbon footprint, spend less time at work and more time with my family. Next time I ask the universe for help with something, I think I'm going to be more specific. This friend was my first roommate when I moved to Chicago from Cincinnati, Ohio, and I stayed with her while I was looking for an apartment. I was so surprised that even in her 800 square foot tiny little flat, she had a front door to the stairs and to the lobby and a back door onto an expansive fire escape, which was much more of a balcony than the to in my apartment in Cincinnati. Like seriously, the only thing more dangerous back in here, I was apartment hunting, and I soon learned that all of the apartments were like that. Front door, back door, back stairs to the alley, and a fire escape that was much more of a porch. And so I asked my friend why. Oh, she said, like, do fire, not again. You go and Google the year 1871 and you will see we are not trifling. Of course, as you all know, in 1871, the burgeoning hub of Chicago nearly burned to the ground, killing hundreds, displacing 100,000 people from their homes, a third of the population then homeless. Not only did the aftermath of an outpouring of global support to the establishment of the Free Public Chicago, the city was determined to rebuild. More beautiful. And New Chicago boasted, and still does, I believe, exposed to the folly of quick-built, thin-walled structures to accommodate rapid economic growth with little or no thought to quality, warmth, safety. Sidewalks and roads made of wood, flammable roofs, lax or inexistent regulations. Of the polluted rivers. Rebuilding the city meant careful urban planning, the intention to build better and more beautifully, a concern for public space in parks and along the waterfront, and of course, appreciation for the impact of philanthropy. Then, of course, as a city, we spent the next century deliberately and legalistically dividing and segregating by race, ethnicity, and access. But that's a topic for another Sunday, another month of Sundays, another year of Sundays. So 150 years after the Great Fire, one of the stars on the Chicago flag, I, a new Chicagoan, marveled at the front door or back door apartments, not to mention the broad park-like boulevards, the beautiful architecture, abundant public spaces of my new city. Like the destructiveness of the Chicago fire, COVID-19 is one of the many catastrophes wrought and in this case, the disease overpopulation, encroaching upon, exploiting, and destroying the natural world. Exotic animals to sell in under-regulated wet markets to be served as delicacies to the elite few who could afford them. But the virus has exposed far more than the folly of the utter subjugation of nature and the exploitation of non-human animals. Its spread has exposed the disastrous inequalities and fragilities in our globalist socioeconomic system, lean to the margins, unprepared and profiteering on pain, built upon exploitation of the vulnerable and the many, to enrich and empower the strong and the few. That system of rugged individualism for the hourly wage earner and government protections and tax welfare for the wealth hoarders. That system of exceptional health care for the powerful and universal power-through-itism for the gig worker. Like all emergencies, this one also brings out the kind and the good in us, the best in us, the bravery in us in the midst of our anxieties, our appreciation for what really matters, our innovative ways to adapt, our love for each other, and the sweet specialness of each moment of beauty, of silence, community, and creativity, our commitment to survive. So what now? Shelter in place, hug and kiss and hold the ones we're allowed to hold, Zoom conference with the ones we're not, hunker down until it's all over? It's never going to be all over. In the poem Interim Time, poet, theologian, and philosopher John O'Donohue wrote, and I liberally exerted this, so if you love this poem, forgive me. You are in this time of the interim, where everything seems withheld. The path you took here has washed out. The way forward is still concealed from you. As far as you can, hold your confidence. Do not allow confusion to squander this call, which is loosening your roots in false ground, that you might come free from all you have outgrown. The more faithfully you can endure here, the more refined your heart will become for your arrival in the new dawn. The great news is that the new dawn, something new, will and must emerge. The difficult news is that the fight to build a new world will have just begun. And I predict it will be a fight. Who rebuilds and how? And what does that look like? When Jennie asked me for a title, I selected Get Better Soon as a double entendre because I want to think about it in every sense. How we get better now by showing our compassion, our humanity, our dignity in a moment of emergency, but also how we get better soon when this is all over. Or, instead of getting better, how can we stay sick enough to heal each other? Sick enough of injustice, cruelty, inequality, supremacy? Sick of everything wrong that allowed this disease to grow, spread, and its health and economic effects to halt us and harm us, particularly those of us just one paycheck away from financial collapse, just one expensive medical treatment away from precipitous decline? We must demand a better world, a more equitable world. We must not, as O'Donohue writes, allow confusion to squander this call. This moment is a challenging gift when the veil has been torn back and the sick inequalities of a public health and well-being built on scarcity in the midst of abundance. We're staying home, staying out of the way of the first responders. But we are the next responders, and how we respond tomorrow will build a new future. O'Donohue writes, "The path you took here to get here has washed out. The way forward is still concealed from you." Let's refuse to go back the way we came. Demand more from society, from our leaders, from each other, and from ourselves. I'm not the first to remark that the global mobilization to save our species from illness could be a model to save us and other species from climate change. The greatest innovations in the social contract have always emerged from disease, emergency, loss, destruction, not the known threats of these catastrophes, but the actual realization of them. If it's true that we only do the right thing after trying everything else, then surely the time has come to do the right thing, because we've tried everything else. Can we enact fierce protections for what remains of the wild spaces on Earth? Can we extend all the benefits of advanced medicine without regard for the net worth of the patient? Can we finally remove the false distinctions between environmental health, public health, and individual health? Can we uphold the wisdom of scientific experts and shape policy around their recommendations? Can power protect and uplift rather than oppress and divide? Can we love the stranger and ourselves? After this pandemic passes, and it will pass, we will have proven we have what it takes to mobilize and respond to crisis on a global scale. A new world is possible. In fact, it will be a new world we emerge into. So what will it look like? I tell you that it's up to us to demand better, to build more beautifully, aggressively protect all that is worth protecting, and create equity everywhere, and refuse to go back the way we came. Let's get to work. Josh?
Hey, we're going to sing Be Ours a Religion. If you have the order of service, you'll see the words printed in it and you can sing along. It's number 1058. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love. And now, Anna.
Okay, so we extinguish the chalice here that it might warm our hearts. May it light your path as you leave this place. May it guide your way until we are together again. Pass it on to Stacy.
Oops. Okay. So our closing words come from an author, Laura Kelly Fanucci. When this is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger, full shelves at the store, conversations with neighbors, a crowded theater, Friday night out, the taste of communion, a routine checkup, the school rush each morning, coffee with a friend, the stadium roaring, each deep breath, a boring Tuesday, life itself. When this ends, may we find that we have become more like the people we wanted to be, we were called to be, we hoped to be, and may we stay that way better for each other because of the worst. Thank you.